Hi, in this video we're going to have a look at how to create the first type of component, which is the highlights and call to actions. So as we previously discussed in the last presentation or the last video, we have a set of components that we're going to have a look at. So today we're going to have a look at highlights and call to actions as well as content components. Now these are quite easy to do, and I'll show you what I want to achieve first, and then we can go into how to implement it. So let's open Experience Editor. This is just a demo site that I'm creating, and within that I have the showcase. Let me just search here. I haven't really structured my environment yet or my toolbox yet, so I'll just add a showcase. And I'll add welcome to DXP. Add a photo here. Just upload the photo. And maybe add something for the button. And okay. So this is the showcase I want to create, or the highlights component that I want to create. In order to do so, what we need to do is, first thing, we go to System, Settings, and then Features, and then I'll create a new module. I'll call this Highlights, just because we already have a call to a showcase. I'll add it within my folder, so I'll choose the content components folder. I need it to have a template, I need to have a branch, I need it to be in the settings because this is where my site setup is. I need a rendering for it, and I need a placeholder settings, and I want it within the site setup. I don't need a layout nor a media library for it, so I'll check these out, and I don't want it in the tenant setup, so I'll check this one out as well. And then we'll proceed. What this ultimately does is it creates a set of folders and the site setup. So if I go here and open again the content components, I'll see the highlights, and within that there is the highlights site setup. It also creates in the different locations I've just defined. So in the branches, again, I said I wanted to create it in the branches, and then UXDX, content components. As you can see, it created a folder for highlights, and same thing for in the templates, and so on and so forth. Now the next thing is I want to actually clone the promo. As we discussed, that most of the components we want to create them based on something that already exists. We don't want to really develop everything from scratch again. So I'll go to Renderings, Features, Experience Accelerator, and then I'll go to the promo. So Page Content, Promo, and I'll right click on it and say Scripts, Clone Rendering. I'll call it Highlights. I'll choose the location. Again, this is the folder that was just created for me, so I'll go to Content Components, then Highlights. I'll add the CSS class as Highlights. I'll say I want to make a copy of the original parameters and the original data source. What this means is that the data source will not be a promo. It will be similar to the promo, but it will be a different data source, and this is for the rendering parameter, same thing. And I actually want my own view, so I don't want to copy or use the original MVC view. I'll copy it, and I'll just go to my location here, views, UXDX. So let me just go here and just change this, and again I'll change the name here to Highlights. So there we've defined all the different components for it, and I'll just proceed. What this will ultimately do is it will take a copy of all the information from the promo and into these different, the templates, the branches, the site setup for it, and everything. And we'll see them in more details as soon as this runs and completes. I chose this as the first component to demo because it's really quite simple. So I can go through the actual scaffolding and what the information does or the site setup does. I won't need to do that every time because you'll understand it from this video. So let's take them one by one. So the first thing is in settings. As you can see, within the highlight site setup, it added something called add available renderings. So it's what this does is it actually says that when you're scaffolding the site and this module is there, go to the available renderings from the site and add the available highlights renderings. So add the rendering for, add it to the available renderings, add the highlights rendering for it. And then add highlights data item. So within the data folder, it's going to create a highlights folder so that I can add different highlights within that. And then the rendering variants, again, it's saying add the rendering variant. In the rendering variants, add the default highlights variant. So that's what the site setup will do. Now let's go to templates, branches, because this is where the next step I need to do is. And then within here, content components, highlights, as you can see here, the available highlights rendering is just adding the name. And the default highlights rendering is another branch that has the name, then the actual structure or the HTML structure or the rendering variant for this particular component. Now that's not how I want it to look. As we said, we want it to look like the showcase. So what I'll do is I'll just copy that one. So it's default wrapper, container, row, left side, right side, and so on and so forth. So let me just copy this so I don't have to write it with you guys, and we're gonna go through what it does right now. I'll go here, copy it, and I'll remove the promo text. I don't have a promo text anymore, and I don't have a promo icon. So as you can see, I have a div with a primary overlay and text color, and then within that there's a container, and within that there's a row, and left side which is a call LG6, and the right side which is another call LG6, and I have an image here and the title, description, read more. So I need to have fields that say title, description, read more, and image. So what I need to go do is go to, again, my feature in the templates, content components, highlights. Again, I don't want a promo. As I said, I want to call it highlights. And I'll add title. Let me just open this up so I can see different field names. Description, read more, and image. And of course I need to define their field types. So I have an image, which is an image. I have a read more, which is a general link. I have a description, which is a multi-line text, and a single line. I'll just copy and paste the URL here, and I don't have any rich text, so I don't need to take the configurations for that. And I'll just remove this whole section for the promo. And there you have it. We've actually created the component. Now let's drag it and drop it just to verify that it's implemented correctly. So I'll go back to my walkthrough 6. Now, as you know, this is currently, we don't have it installed here because this site was created beforehand, before I actually have this site module. So I'll just right click on it and say add site module. And I'll be able to select the highlights as a module. And what this does is it does what the site setup tells it to do. So we've seen that the site setup adds it to the available renderings, adds the data folder, and adds the rendering variant, correct? So again, if I go here and go to rendering variants, I'll look for highlights, and we have here the highlights with the structure that we created. Okay. The second thing I need to do now is just go to my home page. And then I should have something called highlights here. It should look the same exactly as the showcase, so I'll just add it below the showcase so that you can see both of them just below each other. So I'll create another one, highlights. So as you can see, the first one is called showcase, the second one is called highlights. So it hasn't cached yet, so it takes a bit of time to add it, but it should be okay. Some of you may be wondering why this one doesn't have a background color, whereas the other one did. So DXP highlights. So as you can see, the one at the top here has a color, but this one does not. Now, this is because of how my CSS is structured. So again, remember when we discussed in last time the structure of the CSS that we want to achieve. So or the SAS file. So what I have is, I have for each component its own SAS, its own size, its own variance, and so on. And what I did was, if I just download my styles or open my styles, let me show it to you. So that's the compiled version, of course. But as you can see, I said .showcase, .primary overlay, and then it has a background color. That's how the structure or the color is. Now, the .showcase means that the first class should be showcase. And this is what I have in my component SAS. I should do the same thing with that one, just say .highlights, .primary overlay. Now, you might want to be able to change these colors yourself, or you might want to give the content editor the capability to change that color, and you can do that. But in my scenario, what I wanted to do actually is I wanted to define some primary colors, and I created my own custom theme editor so that you can go in and say, well, for example, here, I want to change the overlay color. And what this does is actually updates the CSS directly. So this is why I didn't want to give the flexibility for the content editor to change it to himself, because I wanted it to be shared across all the different components. So if I go back here and just refresh, it should now take the other color. And as you can see, it did. So this is why I set the value directly in the CSS. You can have it in a field. So one other scenario I might want to do is just say, wait a second, I don't want that color to be static or in the CSS. So I'll go into my feature, and then I'll go to highlights, and I want to add something called color, for example, or overlay background color. Now, you don't have to have it without spaces, but I just want to do that for simplicity right now. I'll just use it as a single line text. I'm trying to find single line text for some reason I can't. Okay. And I'll save it. Now, this is currently not set anywhere, so I need to define it. So I'll go back to my rendering variant. So if I go to 3.6, of course I should be doing it in my actual branch, but it's just for demo's sake. I'm going to delete that later on. So here, as you can see, within the wrapper, what I'll do is I'll actually set background, style, background color. This is normal CSS, so all I need to do is just get the CSS for it. So we all know it, but I just want to show it for anyone who doesn't know CSS too well. So as you can see, I just need to take this and copy it. You might wonder what var overlay color one is, but this is CSS3, and this is just defining that the color is actually a variable. So with CSS3, you can have variables that are colors. This is still not supported within Internet Explorer, but for the current demo, I didn't mind to do that. Okay, so I'll just use here the value of background color. Okay. And let's set the background color to some color. So I'll cheat again. So I'll just go to my color editor. And just copy this color. And I would go back to my data folder here. Highlights. Background color. I just set it like that. Of course, you can do an editor like the one I did as a field here, so that the user can actually pick the color rather than have it done in that way. But for simplistic case, or for simple case scenario like mine, I just didn't bother. Okay, now let's refresh. And there you have it. We have the second one as well, which has a color here, and it works perfectly just by setting the color from the actual configuration here. So if I change that one, maybe I'm just playing around now. And refresh. Here you go, change color again. One thing I just skimmed right now, and I need to probably explain a bit more, is what the $sign that I just written meant, or what this ultimately means. What this is saying is that it's reading from the field something from my data source or my data source fields, something called background color, and putting it here. So that's $sign, brackets, and then within it just name your field here. This is really useful when you want to do a background image or you want to do a background color or something like that. This is absolutely great to use for that. One last thing that I might want to do is actually have that button trigger. So this is my read more button, so I can just say read more. Maybe it will take me to the about us, but I might also want it to trigger a goal. I won't actually go through this because Barend has created a great article around this, so I'll just show you the link for it. Give me a second, I'll go to it. Yeah, so as I was saying, Barend has a really good article on how to use the trigger goal via URL or using Sitecore tracking. And this article just tells you how to do that, so I don't need to really go through it again. You can see the URL for this article here. It's on his blogs. Barend writes really great blogs every month around, or every week actually, for Sitecore and SXA. So I would recommend you checking them out as well. Okay, thank you so much. And next time we're going to have a look at how to create listings. And it's really quite interesting what we're going to talk about around listings, because listings by default, or the page list by default, doesn't actually support personalization. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom listing component that does support personalization. Thank you, and see you next time.